Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, um, today is Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. So I hope everybody's is having a good week thus far. Of course, we're going to give people a chance to come in before we get started. Um, so basically, just how let's see. A friendly reminder to everybody, of course, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, la 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 la. La 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 la. Hmm. Let's see, 1 minute 46. Let's see. All right, so let me see now. I'm just trying to think here. And I actually kind of got started setting everything up a little late today, so that's why I didn't get a chance to watch any cartoons. But I did kind of catch up on what happened on last night's Monday Night Raw a bit. Saw some of the highlights from that. Um, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit here. So, anyway, okay. So we're a little early, about 2.5 minutes. I guess I'll start talking about what's on tap for tonight. So tonight I do have one article I'm gonna go over. Tonight we're gonna make this a Daffy Duck focus night. There is an article about the most searched questions that MeTV Tunes did. We're going to go over that article, and depending on how fast we get through that, maybe we might even touch up on Daffy's history a little bit. Just kind of look back to through his history a little bit. Daffy Duck, Warner Brothers, voiced by Mel Blanc for many years. Then, of course, on the Wrestling Wrap Up, we'll get caught up on last night's Monday Night Raw, as well as look ahead to tonight's NXT, and then from there we'll probably wrap up with this day in each history. So with all that, and I see somebody else is here as well. So with all that, why don't we go ahead and get started then? Get right into this. We'll get right into the article here. Daffy Ducky, oh so funny. Daffy Ducky, oh so funny. All right, so most searched questions about Daffy Duck. He's one despicable duck, but we love him anyway. Article posted today by MeTV Doom staff, and they're at Warner Brothers Cartoons Incorporated. Daffy Duck presents. So he may be the second banana on the Looney Tunes roster, but he's the number one duck for us. Daffy Duck is a character who seems like an open book, but fans still have questions. We scoured the internet for some of the most frequently asked questions about Daffy, and here are our answers to them. Number one, is Daffy Duck a girl? Does Daffy lay eggs? Daffy is a boy and doesn't lay eggs, but sometimes he sits on them. Yes, I've seen there's at least a couple, there's about 2 or 3 cartoons I know of where his wife, as it were, in the cartoons would make him sit on the eggs while she went out. Number two, does Daffy have a girlfriend? He has a wife, or at least the concept of a wife. Different lady ducks have played Daffy's wife in various cartoons, such as His Better Half and Stork Naked. One thing all of Daffy's wives have in common is that none of them are impressed by Daffy. Um, Now, mind you, and we talked about this a little bit before, of course, with a number of different characters in the Golden Age. Anytime they wanted to show the parenting skills of a character, normally they'd bring in, of course, nephews because, you know, even to show the illusion of children outside of wedlock was not going to go over with the Hays Code. So that's why a number of, but of course, many times here, Daffy is usually depicted with a wife they, um, whenever they wanted to depict him as a parent. So, anyways, number 3, does Daffy Duck have a sister? Is Daffy Duck related to Donald Duck? Yeah, I'm sure that one gets asked quite a bit too. Daffy Duck and Donald Duck are not related. As far as we can tell, Daffy does not have any brothers or sisters, or any explicit family outside of his one-time wives and children. Occasionally in comics, he will refer to flocks of ducks as his relations, quote unquote, but that's the most we know of Daffy's family. He's a lone duck. Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to say that he and Donald, because they look like two different types of Daffy's. There's all black and Donald's all white, so they might be just different species of duck altogether. Let's see. Number 4, does Daffy Duck have a middle name? Not in the original theatrical cartoons, but in Baby Looney Tunes, his middle name is revealed as Dumas, making his full name Daffy Dumas Duck. Does Daffy Duck have teeth? Yes. That's the 5th question there. And again, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. I'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Number 6, can Daffy Duck swim? Can Daffy Duck fight? Can Daffy Duck fly? Yes, yes, yes. Daffy Duck does all of those things. He flies and swims often, and he enters a boxing ring in cartoons like To Duck or Not to Duck. Number 7, what kind of duck is Daffy? Many questions focused on what kind of breed Daffy is. Is he a mallard or a loon or another kind of duck? To that we say he's not a loon, he's a Looney Tunes. Jokes aside, Daffy's breed is never specified. He's simply an anthropomorphic black duck. Number 8, did Daffy Duck join the Marines? Daffy and other Looney Tunes characters appeared in military-themed cartoons during World War II. But Daffy's foray into the Marines occurred on the Looney Tunes show episode Semper Lie, where a lie snowballs into Daffy joining the Marines. Uh, hmm. And again, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. All right, number 8. So number 9 now. How tall is Daffy? Daffy Duck. Daffy's size changes from being realistically duck-sized in the early cartoons to being listed as 3.5 feet in the Looney Tunes show. You could say he's grown. Ha ha ha. Number 10. Why does Daffy Duck have a lisp? Let's see. According to his voice actor, Mel Blanc, quote, it seemed to me that such an extended mandible would hinder his speech. Basically, the duck bill, right? Particularly on words containing an S sound. Thus, in smaller quotes, despicable became despicable. Number 11. When was Daffy Duck created? How old is Daffy? Daffy Duck made his first appearance in Porky's Duck Hunt, which premiered on April 7th, 1937. That means Daffy is 86 years old. Hold on. No, I had to kind of correct April 17th, 1937. We're now into September 9th, 2025. I actually have to correct the author here. He's not 86. He's let's see, 2025 minus 1937, 15 minus 7 is 8. He's 88, not 86. So he's actually 88 years old, not 86. But he looks quite good for 88, doesn't he? Right? Number 12. Does Daffy say sufferin' succotash? Quote unquote. He does. While his normal catchphrase is, quote unquote, you're despicable, he exclaims, quote, sufferin' succotash, unquoted, unquote, in his bitter half. Now, of course, the reason, that gets asked a lot is because sufferin' succotash is a catchphrase of another lispy Looney Tunes character, Sylvester the Cat. Right? So, anyways, let's see now. Moving on. Let's see. Moving on to question number 13. When did Daffy meet Bugs? They first appeared and properly interacted with each other in Chuck Jones' Rabbit Fire, which premiered in 1951. However, Bugs has a brief cameo in Porky Pig's Feet, F-E-A-T, which starred Daffy in 1943. Porky Pig's Feet, that was kind of the one where Daffy and Porky, I believe, were both being forced to stay in a hotel, even though they hadn't paid the rent. Basically they were being held prisoners in the hotel because they hadn't paid for their, they hadn't kept up on the payment for their dates. They called, at the end of the cartoon, they called Bugs, and he was kind of in the same predicament. All right, number 14. Does Daffy hate Bugs? Hate is a strong word. We like to think of them more as frenemies. They are rivals in most cartoons, but in others, such as the abominable Snow Rabbit, they're bickering friends who have to work together. Daffy is obsessively jealous of Bugs. Though, and strong jealousy and frustration can certainly come off as hateful sometimes. Yeah, especially when you're trying to figure out who's going to get shot by Elmer, right? It's rabbit season, no, duck season, rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season, fire! Right? Anyways, as we get ready to continue on. Let's see now. Question number 15. Why did Daffy's personality change? Like most Looney Tunes characters, Daffy started out one way and slowly evolved into the character we know now. Daffy began as a purely goofy comic relief character, but he really changed when Bugs became the star of the show. It's like, Daffy, of course, Daffy's early incarnations, of course, had him acting Daffy, hence the name, Daffy Duck, right? Bugs' rapid rise made animators reimagine Daffy into a proper equal rival for Bugs. This change in character begins in Rabbit Fire, which is when Bugs and Daffy finally appear face to face. Watch Bugs Bunny and Friends on MeTV Toons weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. 8 Central, 6 Pacific, and 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific. Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific, and Sundays at 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Pacific. All right, so there we go with that one. So I do need to step away from the computer for a moment. Let's see. Yeah, so I think we'll have time to do something else here. I do need to step away from the computer for a moment, but I will be right back. But I'll put some music on while I'm gone. When I come back, maybe we'll look into Daffy's history a little bit more. So let's give me a sec here. Gonna put some music on for you guys when I'm done. And I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So now what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go see if I figured today would be a good day to focus in on Daffy Duck. So let's do a little Daffy Duck history lesson here. Let's get a little bit more information on Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers classic duck here, Daffy Duck. All right. So, and again, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. That being said, let's get into doing a little bit more thorough study of Daffy Duck here. So, Daffy Duck is an animated cartoon character created by animators Tex Avery and Bob Clampett for Leon Schlesinger Productions. Of course, Leon Schlesinger Productions would eventually sell out to Warner Brothers 1944, but started off. Anyway, styled as an anthropomorphic black duck, he has appeared in cartoon series such as Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, in which he is usually depicted as a foil for either Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, or Speedy Gonzales. Speedy Gonzales more like in the 60s. He was one of the first of the new quote-unquote screwball characters that emerged in the late 1930s. To replace traditional everyman characters who were more popular earlier in the decade, such as Mickey Mouse, Porky Pig, and Popeye. Daffy starred in 130 shorts in the Golden Age. Golden Age was basically 1930s to 1950s, basically. Making him the most frequent character in the Looney Tunes Merry Melodies cartoons, making him the third most frequent character in Looney Tunes Merry Melodies cartoons, behind Bugs Bunny's 167 appearances and Porky Pig's 153 appearances. Virtually every Warner Brothers cartoon director, most notably Bob Clampett, Robert McKimson, and Chuck Jones, put his own spin on the Daffy Duck character. He was ranked number 14 on TV Guide's list of top 50 greatest cartoon characters. And over here, of course, with a little bit of the first appearance, Porky's Duck Hunt, April 17th, 1937, 88 years ago, created by Tex Avery, Bob Clement, voiced over the years, of course, voiced by Mel Blanc, pretty much from the beginning, 1937 to 1989, and Jeff Bergman from 1989 to 93, 1997, 2002 to 2004, 2007, 2011 to 18, then Joe Lasky from 1990 to 2011 and 2014, Greg Burson from 1999, 92 to 95, 97, 98, 2003. Basically just a bunch of them. But primarily, of course, and Eric Bonza is the current voice of Daffy, but primarily known for his time with being voiced by Mel Blanc. Anyways, we continue on here. Origin. So, Daffy's first appearance in Porky's Duck Hunt, released on April 17, 1937. The cartoon was directed by Tex Avery and animated by Bob Clampett. Porky's Duck Hunt is a standard hunter-prey pairing, but Daffy, in parentheses, barely more than an unnamed bit player in this short, unparenthesed, was something new to moviegoers. An assertive, completely unrestrained, combative protagonist, Clampett later recalled, quote, "At that time, audiences weren't accustomed to seeing a cartoon character do these things." And so when it hit the theaters, it was an explosion. People would leave the theaters talking about this Daffy Duck. Uh, this early Daffy is less anthropomorphic and resembles a normal black duck. In fact, the only aspects of the characters that have remained consistent through the years are his voice characterization by Mel Blanc and his black feathers with a white neck ring. Blanc's characterization of Daffy once held the world record for longest characterization of one animated character by their original actor for 52 years. Yeah. I mean, could you argue that? Well, I guess you could make the argument that, yeah, that would have even eclipsed, but Bugs, because Mel Blanc did Bugs as well. The origin of Davy's voice with his lateral lisp is a matter of some debate. One often repeated, quote unquote, official story is that it was modeled after Leon Schlesinger's tendency to lisp. However, in Mel Blanc's autobiography, that's not all. That's not all, folks. All folks. He contradicts that conventional belief, writing, quote, "It seemed to me," and we read this part before. Basically, the idea was, if you guys remember from what we read in the last in the earlier article there, Mel Blanc thought that having, because of his bill, because of a natural duck bill, that would lead to him having a lisp. So I was just taking care of a little bug that was running around on my computer there. Yeah, so thus despicable became despicable. Daffy's slobbery, exaggerated lisp was developed over time, and it is barely noticeable in the early cartoons. In The Scarlet Pumpernickel, 1950, Daffy has a middle name, Dumas, as the writer of a swashbuckling script, a nod to Alexander Dumas. I believe the Count of Monte Cristo author there. Also, in the Baby Looney Tunes episode The Tattletale, Granny addresses Daffy as Daffy Horatio Tiberius Duck. In the Looney Tunes show 2011, the joke middle names Armando and Sheldon are used. Golden Age years. Daffy's early years, 1937 to 1940. Tex Avery and Bob Clampett created the original version of Daffy in 1937. Daffy established his status by jumping into the water, hopping around, and yelling, "Woohoo! Woohoo!" Animator Bob Clampett immediately seized upon the Daffy Duck character and cast him in a series of cartoons in the 1930s and 1940s. The early Daffy is a wild and zany screwball, perpetually bouncing around the screen with cries of "hoo hoo hoo hoo." In parentheses, in his autobiography, Mel Blanc stated that the zany demeanor was inspired by Hugh Herbert's catchphrase, which was taken to a wild extreme for Daffy. Let's see now. Let's see. World War II Daffy, 1941 to 1945. Daffy would also feature in several war-themed shorts during World War II, remaining true to his unbridled nature. He battles a Nazi goat intent on eating Daffy's scrap metal in Scrap Happy Daffy, 1943. Hits Adolf Hitler's head with a giant mallet in Daffy the Commando, 1943, and outwits Hitler. Goebbels and Goring in outwits Hitler, Goebbels, and Goring in Plain Daffy, 1944. Oddly enough, it was only after these wartime escapades that Daffy is actually subject to conscription into military service in the form of, quote, the little man from the draft board, unquote, whom he tries to dodge in Drafty Dodge Daffy in 1945. Evolving earlier Daffy, 1946 to 1950. And before we read that, let me see if there's any. Again, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best ability. That goes for both my Rumble and my YouTube viewers. Anyways, for Daffy Doodles, in parentheses, his first Looney Tune cartoon as a director, Robert McKimson tamed Daffy a bit, redesigning him yet again to be rounder and less elastic. The studio also instilled some of Bugs Bunny's savvy into the duck, making him as brilliant with his mouth as he was with his battiness. Daffy was teamed up with Porky Pig, the duck's one-time rival, became his straight man. Arthur Davis, who of course did a lot of work for Terry Toons as well earlier in his career, before for his work in Warner Brothers, who directed Warner Brothers cartoon shorts for a few years in the late 1940s until upper management decided or decreed there should be only 3 units. McKimson, Fritz Frayling, and Jones presented a Daffy similar to McKimson's. McKimson is noted as the last of the 3 units to make his Daffy uniform with Jones's, with even late shorts such as Don't Axe Me, 1958, featuring traits of the quote-unquote screwball Daffy. Starring in You Were Never Duckier, Daffy's personality evolved to be less loony and more greedy. Mine, 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 mine. Let me see. There we go. There it is. Trying to find the cursor there. Alright, anyways, getting back to the article here. Experimenting with Daffy, 1951 to 1964. While Daffy's loony days were over, McKimson continued to make him as bad or good as his various roles required him to be. McKimson would often have Daffy play the role of a salesman who pushes a potential customer into buying something such as full coverage, 1952, in parentheses there, where Daffy actually succeeds in selling Porky Pig a $1 million accident policy, which only works under impossible conditions, which unfortunately for Daffy, all the conditions happen, and the High and Flighty, 1956, where Daffy intervenes with Foghorn Leghorn and Barnyard Dog's usual annex by selling them novelty joke items to get back at each other, which the latter catch on and team up against Daffy um, to trap him in one of the prank kits he sold to them. Mine, 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 mine. All right, so let's see. Let's see. McKimson would use this version of Daffy from 1946 to 1961, so for 15 years there. Although even McKimson would follow in Jones' footsteps in many aspects with cartoons like People Are Bunny, 1959, and Ducking the Devil, 1957, Fritz Frehling's version took a hint from Chuck Jones to make the duck more sympathetic, as in Showbiz Bugs, 1957. Here, Daffy is over emotional and jealous of Bugs, yet he has real talent that is ignored by the theater manager and the crowd. The cartoon finishes with a sequence in which Daffy attempts to wow the Bugs um, besotted audience um, with an act in which he drinks gasoline and swallows nitroglycerin, gunpowder, and uranium 238 in a greenish solution. Oh boy, that's not good. uh, that's not good. That's not something that you really should be drinking. Uh, let's see. Jumps up and down to quote unquote shake well, and finally swallows a lit match that detonates the whole improbable mixture. Um, when Bugs tells Daffy that the audience loves the act um, and wants more, Daffy, now a ghost floating upward, presumably to heaven (parentheses), says that he can only do the act once. Some TV stations, um, and in the 1990s, the cable network TNT edited out the dangerous act, afraid of imitation by young children. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Pairing of Daffy and Porky in parodies of popular movies, 1951 to 1965. While Bugs Bunny became Warner Brothers' most popular character, the director still found ample use for Daffy. Several cartoons place him in parodies of popular movies and radio serials. Porky Pig was usually a comic relief sidekick. For example, Daffy in The Great Piggy Bank Robbery, and he was set it as Duck Tracy, Dick in parentheses Dick Tracy, by Bob Clampett. In The Scarlet Pumpernickel, 1950, Daffy was the hero and Porky Pig was the villain. In Drip Along Daffy, 1951, um, named after the Hopalong Cassidy character, throws Daffy into a Western, with him labeled, quote, Western type hero, unquote, and Porky Pig labeled comedy relief. In Duck Dodgers, in the 24th and a half century, 1953, a parody of Buck Rogers, Daffy trades bards and bullets with Marvin the Martian, while Porky Pig retaining the role Daffy's sidekick in Rocket Squad, a parody of Dragnet and Racket Squad. Daffy and Porky Pig pair up once again. Daffy also played Stupor Duck, a parody of the Adventures of Superman television series. Robin Hood Daffy, in 1958, cast Duck in the role of the legendary outlaw Robin Hood, with Porky as Friar Tuck. China Jones, 1959, named after Chris Smith, or China Smith, has Daffy in Hong Kong, playing the role of a private investigator. Before we get into the next one, I do need to step away from the computer for a quick moment. I'll be right back, but I'll put some music on while I'm gone. Put some music on while I'm gone here. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyways, getting back to the article here. Pairing of Bugs and Daffy, 1951 to 1964. Let's see. Bugs' ascension to stardom also prompted the Warner Brothers animators to recast Daffy as the rabbit's rival, tensely jealous, insecure, and determined to steal back the spotlight, while Bugs either remained cool-headed but mildly amused and or indifferent to the duck's jealousy, sometimes using it to his advantage. Daffy's desire to achieve stardom at almost any cost was explored as early as 1940 in Frayling's You Ought to Be in Pictures. That one was kind of a mix of live action and animation, in which you had Porky Pig and Daffy Duck interacting with with a number of the animators and production staff. Most notably, of course, Leon Schlesinger, as well as Michael Maltese was the security guard. But the idea was most successfully used by Chuck Jones, who redesigned the duck once again, making him scrawnier and scruffier in Jones's quote-unquote hunting trilogy of Duck Season, Rabbit Season, Duck Season, Rabbit Season trilogy, or Duck Season, Rabbit Season trilogy of Rabbit Fire, Rabbit Seasoning, and Duck Rabbit Duck. Parentheses, each respectively launched in 1951, 52, and 53. Unparenthesed. Daffy's attention-grabbing ways and excitability provide Bugs Bunny the perfect opportunity to fool the hapless Elmer Fudd into repeatedly shooting the duck's bill off. Yep, I'm sure. And I've kind of played on that too. Duck season, rabbit, that kind of thing. Also, these cartoons reveal Daffy's catchphrase, quote, "You're despicable," unquote. Jones's Daffy sees himself as a self-preservationist, not selfish. However, this Daffy can do nothing that does not backfire on him. More likely to singe his tail feathers, as well as his ego and pride, than anything. It is thought that Chuck Jones based Daffy Duck's new personality on his fellow animator, Bob Clampett, who, like Daffy, was known as a loud self-promoter. In Beanstalk Bunny, Daffy, Bug, and Elmer are once again teamed up in a parody of Jack and the Beanstalk, with Elmer as the giant. In A Star is Bored, Daffy tries to upstage Bugs Bunny in spoofs of the TV shows The Millionaire and This Is Your Life. Daffy tries to defeat his arch rival, Bugs Bunny, for a $1 million prize given out by his favorite TV show, The Millionaire. And in This Is a Life, Daffy tries to upstage Bugs Bunny in order to be the guest of honor on the show. In all four of these cartoons, Daffy ends up a loser because of his own over-emotional personality, which impairs Daffy's common sense and reasoning ability, and his craving for attention. Solo Daffy. Let's see here. Solo Daffy. All right. Film critic Steve Schneider called Jones' version of Daffy, quote, a kind of unleashed id, unquote. Jones said that his version of the character, quote, expresses all the things we're afraid to express, unquote. This is evident in Jones's Duck Amuck, 1953, quote, one of the few unarguable masterpieces of American animation, unquote, according to Schneider. In the episode, Daffy is played by a godlike animator whose malicious paintbrush alters the setting, soundtrack, and even Daffy when Daffy demands to know who is responsible for the changes. The camera pulls back to reveal none other than Bugs Bunny. Duck Amuck is widely heralded as a classic of filmmaking for its illustration that a character's personality can be recognized independently of appearances, setting, voice, and plot. In 1999, the short was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. All right. And we'll probably, after this last one, Daffy's pairing with Speedy, that's probably where we'll stop. We won't get into like the Daffy Duck show and all that and more recent. We won't do that. We're just focusing in on, basically the golden / silver age of Daffy, up through the 60s there. All right. So Daffy's pairing with Speedy, 1965 to 68. When the Warner Brothers Animation Studio briefly outsourced cartoon production to DePatie Frayling Enterprises (DFE), DePatie Frayling Enterprises was the company that gave us, of course, the Pink Panther cartoons of the 60s and early 70s. That was like Pink Panther, and an Aardvark, the Inspector, among others. In the 1960s, Daffy Duck became an antagonist in several cartoons opposite Speedy Gonzales, who refers to Daffy as, quote unquote, the Loco Duck. In Well-Worn Daffy, 1965, Daffy is determined to keep the mice away from a desperately needed well, seemingly for no other motive than pure maliciousness. Furthermore, when he draws all the water he wants, Daffy then attempts to destroy the well, in spite of the vicious pointlessness of the act, forcing Speedy to stop him. The Warner Brothers studio was entering its twilight years, and even Daffy had to stretch for humor in the period. In many of the later DFE cartoons, such as Featherfinger and Daffy's Diner, Daffy is portrayed as a more sympathetic character, and often forced to turn against Speedy at the behest of a common enemy, rather than the full-blown villain he is in cartoons like Assault and Peppered. The last cartoon featuring Daffy and Speedy is See You Later, Gladiator, in what animation fans call the worst cartoon made by Warner Brothers. All right, so that's all we'll do on Daffy Duck tonight. That's still a good chunk of history there. Hope you all enjoyed that. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the, we're at 53 minutes here, so it looks like we're going to run a little beyond an hour, which is fine as long as it's not too long. But I was trying to get right up to an hour, but it looks like we'll go a little beyond that. But anyway, so we're going to look back to last night. So we'll look back to last night's Monday Night Raw, and then look ahead to tonight's NXT. Of course, there'll be some TNA talent as well on there, most likely. So we're going to move on to the wrestling wrap-up. As on last night's Monday Night Raw, coming from the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on Netflix with Corey Graves and Joe Tessitore doing commentary. The opening match saw AJ Styles defeat El Grande Americano as Americano's, little buddy decided to try to interfere on his behalf, only for Dragon Lee to come out to defeat him. Of course, AJ Styles hit the Styles Clash on El Grande Americano to get the win. In a women's match, one half of the former women's world tag team champion Raquel Rodriguez, with Roxanne Perez, her most recent partner, in her corner, defeated Lyra Valkyria with Tiana Bomb. Then Rusev defeated Penta in a singles match. Asuka, with Kairi Sane in her corner, defeated Nikki Bella. only for her to confront Nikki Bella backstage after the match, only for Rhea Ripley to come and kind of help break things up there. And in the main event, saw Bronson Reed with Braun Breaker in his corner defeat LA Knight. And of course, seeing, and it looks like for the most part, the WrestlePalooza card for a week from this Saturday on the 20th is just about fully set. Last night saw the signing, of course, of the Vision's Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed being signed to face the Usos. Also, it was confirmed last night that in a mixed tag team match, WWE World Heavyweight Champion Seth Rollins teams with his wife, WWE Women's Intercontinental Champion Becky Lynch, to take on CM Punk and the recently returned AJ Lee. So now, as we look ahead to tonight's NXT, which will be, of course, on the CW, most likely from the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, I believe. Let me just check that. Yep. So set for tonight's NXT from the Performance Center on the CW. In a semifinal match for the number one contendership match, with the winner, of course, taking on last week's winner, Candice LeRae. Triple A's Fabi Apache will be taking on Lainey Reed in the semifinals of the tournament, determine the number one contender to the WWE Women's Speed title. The winner of this match will, of course, will move on to take on Candice LeRae, who won on last week's show. The winner of that match will then move on to face Sol Ruca for the Women's Speed title. In a flag match, Ethan Page of Canada, and the current WNXT North American champion, will be taking on Tavian Heights. In a triple threat match, determine the number one contender for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles. NXT North American and current WWE Women's Speed, or current WWE Women's North American and Speed champion Sol Ruca teams Azaria to take on Fatal Influences, Fallon Henley and Jasmine Nick, and the Callings Izzy Dame and Tatum Paxley determine the number one contender for the WWE Women's Tag Team title. And then the NXT tag titles will be on the line as the Dark State duo of Osiris Griffin and Dion Lennox are set to defend the titles against Hank and Tank Ledger and Hank Walker, as this is, I believe, Hank and Tank's contractual rematch. So we do, maybe not as much, but we do have some things going on. All right, so that's all I got for the wrestling wrap-up tonight. Hey, Bone. Yo. Thanks for popping in there, Bone. All right, so with that being said, now we're going to go ahead and move on to this day in each history. Today is, of course, Tuesday, September 9th, 2025, rather. So we're going to take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So 65, 55, 85, and 2005. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So first off, we're going to head back 70 years ago, as on this date, 70 years ago today, back in 1955. The 1950s version This is the version that predates the one created in 1972 by Sam Munchnick. The 1950s version of the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Championship is vacated as having been last held by Ronnie Etchinson. Don't know why it was vacated, but at this point, it had been so on this date, 70 years ago today, the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Champ, the 1950s version, vacated by Ronnie Etchison. Now we move ahead, of course, to 1965. On this date in 1965, 60 years ago today, as soon as I bring that up. On this date in 1965, the 45th issue of Fantastic Four went on sale on this date back in 1965. It sold for 12 cents for 32 pages with Stan Lee, of course, the editor. The story was titled Among Us Hide the Inhumans and written by Stan Lee, penciled by Jack Kirby, inked by Joe Sinnott, and R.D. Simek did the lettering. So on this date, 60 years ago today, the 45th issue of Fantastic Four from Marvel Comics went on sale on this date. Now, of course, getting ready to move on to the next piece. We move ahead to 1985, 40 years ago today. On this date, 1985, 40 years ago today. So, premiering on TF1 in France and in syndication in the United States, JC and the Wheel Warriors makes the Deke Audio Visuals. JC and the Wheel Warriors makes its premiere. Also, Filmation's She-Ra, Princess of Power premiered on this date back in 1985. So 4 years ago today, the premieres of JC and the Wheeled Warriors and She-Ra, Princess of Power premiered on this date back in 1985. So. And they do say that they do say in that line there, because I know probably some of you saw it, but Thundercats made its regular debut. It had premiered earlier in 1985 on January 23rd, but made its basically regular debut on September 9th. So, and moving ahead to the year 2005, 20 years ago today, on this date, 20 years ago today, Mushi Productions. Mushi Productions. Mushi Productions. As soon as I find it up here. Mushi Productions, Nagasaki, 1945. Angerus no Kane premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 2005, or 20 years ago today. Nagasaki, 1945. Angerus no Kane premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 2005, rather, or 20 years ago today. All right, so with that being said, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Of course, we'll be back here with more Niche News tomorrow. And of course, don't forget this Sunday, I'll be joined by RJ Carter from Critical Blast as we will be looking back comics went on sale in June of 1940. This week we'll be focusing in on Novelty Press. So with that, I thank you all for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.